I am Sofia Martinez, 32 years old, and I used to believe that blood was thicker than water until my own brother proved me devastatingly wrong. The day I discovered he had sold my thriving marketing agency to my biggest competitor, who also happened to be my ex-fiancé, was the day my entire world crumbled. If you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most, please hit that like button and subscribe. Growing up in the Martinez household meant understanding that success was everything, and failure was simply not an option. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My father, Carlos, had built a modest but successful construction company from nothing, working 18-hour days to provide for our family in Phoenix, Arizona. My mother, Isabella, managed the books and kept us all in line with her fierce determination and unwavering standards. In their eyes, hard work and family loyalty were the twin pillars that held our world together. My brother Diego was 3 years older than me, and from the moment I could walk, I worshipped the ground he walked on. He was everything I aspired to be, charismatic, confident, and seemingly destined for greatness. While I spent my childhood buried in books and art projects, Diego was out making friends, playing sports, and charming everyone he met. Our parents adored his natural leadership abilities and his way of bringing people together. I was the quiet one, the planner, the one who noticed details others missed. While Diego commanded attention at family gatherings with his stories and jokes, I preferred to observe from the corner, taking mental notes on how people interacted and what made them tick. This tendency toward observation would later become the foundation of my career in marketing, but as a child, it often made me feel invisible next to my magnetic older brother. Despite our different personalities, Diego and I were incredibly close. He was my protector, my confidant, and my biggest cheerleader. When kids at school made fun of my thick glasses and studious nature, Diego would step in with his easy smile and somehow turn the situation around, making me feel included rather than excluded. When I struggled with math in middle school, he spent hours helping me with homework, never making me feel stupid for not understanding concepts that came naturally to him. Our bond deepened during our teenage years when our parents went through a rough patch financially. Dad's construction company hit hard times during the 2008 recession, and suddenly our comfortable middle-class lifestyle was threatened. I watched my parents argue in hushed whispers late at night, saw the stress lines deepen around my mother's eyes, and felt the weight of uncertainty settle over our household. Diego and I became allies in trying to help our family through the crisis. He took on after-school jobs and contributed every penny to the household expenses, while I threw myself into academics, determined to earn scholarships that would ease the financial burden of my college education. We made a pact during those difficult months: we would always have each other's backs no matter what life threw at us. We would build something together someday, something that would make our parents proud and ensure our family never faced financial uncertainty again. By the time I graduated high school as valedictorian, our family's situation had stabilized, but the experience had left its mark on all of us. I had learned that security was fragile, and that success required not just hard work, but strategic thinking and careful planning. Diego had learned that his natural charisma could be channeled into sales and relationship building, skills that would serve him well in whatever career he chose. I received a full scholarship to Arizona State University, where I majored in business with a focus on marketing and communications. The field fascinated me because it combined my love of psychology and human behavior with practical business applications. I excelled in my courses, particularly those dealing with consumer behavior and brand strategy. My professors consistently praised my analytical mind and creative approach to problem solving. During my junior year, I met Marcus Thompson in my advanced marketing seminar. He was a transfer student from UCLA, tall and lean with piercing blue eyes and an infectious laugh that could light up any room. Marcus had this way of making everyone around him feel like they were the most interesting person in the world. He was pursuing the same major as me, and we quickly became study partners, then friends, and eventually much more. Marcus shared my passion for marketing, but where I was methodical and research-driven, he was intuitive and bold. I would spend hours analyzing data and consumer trends before making a recommendation, while he could walk into a room, read the energy, and somehow know exactly what approach would work. We complemented each other perfectly, and our professors often held up our collaborative projects as examples for other students. By our senior year, Marcus and I were inseparable. We spent countless hours in the library working on our thesis projects, dreaming about our future careers and the impact we wanted to make in the marketing world. He had this vision of starting an agency that would help small businesses compete with major corporations by leveraging clever, cost-effective marketing strategies. I was captivated by his ambition and his genuine desire to help underdogs succeed. When Marcus proposed during our graduation ceremony, with both our families watching and cheering, I felt like my life was finally falling into perfect alignment. We had been accepted to the same MBA program, we shared the same career goals, and we had the support of our families. The future stretched ahead of us, bright and full of possibilities. Diego was my maid of honor, so to speak, at our engagement party. In his speech, he talked about how proud he was to see his little sister find someone who appreciated her brilliance and matched her ambition. He joked about how Marcus would need his permission before making any major decisions, but his genuine affection for my fiancé was obvious to everyone in the room. Marcus, for his part, immediately welcomed Diego into his circle of close friends, appreciating my brother's business instincts and natural networking abilities. Our MBA program was intensive and challenging, but Marcus and I thrived on the pressure and competition. We continued to work together on projects, and our professors encouraged us to consider starting our own venture after graduation. The idea of building something from the ground up appealed to both of us, especially given our shared vision of helping smaller businesses compete in an increasingly complex marketplace. During our second year, we began developing a business plan for what would eventually become Elevate Marketing Solutions. The concept was straightforward: provide boutique-level marketing services to small and medium-sized businesses at prices they could afford, using a combination of digital strategies and old-fashioned relationship building. We spent months researching the market, analyzing competitors, and refining our approach. I handled the analytical side of the business plan, conducting extensive market research and developing financial projections. Marcus focused on the creative vision and client acquisition strategies. Together we created something that felt revolutionary, at least to us. We were young and idealistic enough to believe we could change the industry, and experienced enough to have a realistic plan for doing so. When we graduated with our MBAs, both of us with honors, we faced a choice: take high-paying jobs at established agencies, or take the leap and start our own company. The safe choice would have been to gain a few years of experience working for someone else, but we were impatient and confident in our abilities. We decided to bet on ourselves. Diego was incredibly supportive of our decision. He had been working in sales for a technology company, and had built an impressive network of business contacts throughout Phoenix and the surrounding area. He offered to help us find our first clients, and even suggested he might want to join our company once we got established. Having my brother's support meant everything to me, especially since our parents were somewhat skeptical about our decision to turn down job offers in favor of starting our own business. We launched Elevate Marketing Solutions 6 months after graduation, operating out of a small office space in downtown Phoenix that we shared with 2 other startups. Our first client was a local restaurant owner who had heard about us through Diego's network. The project was small, just developing a social media strategy and some basic promotional materials, but we treated it like we were working for a Fortune 500 company. The restaurant campaign exceeded everyone's expectations. Within 3 months, their foot traffic had increased by 40%, and their social media following had grown from 200 to over 5,000 engaged followers. More importantly, their revenue increased significantly, allowing them to hire additional staff and extend their hours. Word of mouth spread quickly in Phoenix's tight-knit business community, and soon we had more potential clients than we could handle. Marcus and I worked 18-hour days during those early months, fueled by adrenaline and the thrill of seeing our vision come to life. We handled everything ourselves: client meetings, strategy development, creative execution, and administrative tasks. It was exhausting but exhilarating. Every new client felt like validation of our decision to strike out on our own. By the end of our first year, we had grown from 2 employees to 8, and our client roster included restaurants, retail stores, professional service firms, and even a few larger companies that had heard about our innovative approaches. Our revenue had exceeded our most optimistic projections, and we were forced to move to a larger office space to accommodate our growing team. Diego joined us full-time during our second year, taking on the role of business development director. His natural charisma and extensive network made him incredibly effective at building relationships with potential clients and partners. More importantly, having him as part of the team felt like the fulfillment of that childhood pact we had made during our family's difficult times. We were building something together, something that would make our parents proud and provide security for our futures. The three of us made an incredible team. Marcus was the visionary, always pushing us to think bigger and take on more ambitious projects. I was the strategist, ensuring that our creative ideas were grounded in solid research and achievable goals. Diego was the connector, building relationships and finding opportunities we never would have discovered on our own. Our complementary skills and shared trust created a dynamic that felt unstoppable. Our client base continued to expand, and we began attracting attention from larger companies and even some national brands. We hired additional staff, including specialized designers, copywriters, and account managers. The office buzzed with creative energy, and our team felt more like a family than a group of employees. Marcus and I made a point of maintaining the collaborative, supportive culture that had attracted our best people. As we approached our third anniversary, Elevate Marketing Solutions had become one of the most respected boutique agencies in Phoenix. We had been featured in local business publications, won several industry awards, and built a reputation for delivering exceptional results for our clients. Our annual revenue had grown to over $2 million, and we were projected to hit $3 million the following year. The success was intoxicating, but it also brought new challenges. Larger agencies began targeting our clients with aggressive pricing and promises of expanded services. Some of our competitors started recruiting our best employees with significantly higher salaries than we could afford to match. The pressure of managing rapid growth while maintaining our culture and quality standards was constant and intense. Marcus began pushing for us to expand beyond Phoenix, suggesting we open offices in other major southwestern cities. I was more cautious, worried about spreading ourselves too thin before we had fully established our foundation. These strategic disagreements became more frequent and more heated as our success continued to grow. Diego often found himself caught in the middle of these discussions, trying to mediate between Marcus's ambition and my caution. He had a gift for finding common ground and helping us focus on our shared goals rather than our tactical differences. His ability to keep us united was crucial during the more stressful periods of our growth. Despite the challenges, our personal relationships remained strong. Marcus and I had postponed our wedding to focus on building the business, but we were still deeply committed to each other and to our shared vision. Diego had started dating a wonderful woman named Carmen, and the four of us often spent weekends together, mixing business discussions with social activities. Our families were incredibly proud of what we had accomplished. My parents, who had initially worried about our decision to start our own company, now bragged to anyone who would listen about their successful daughter and future son-in-law. Diego's success as part of our team had also elevated his status in their eyes, and family gatherings became celebrations of our collective achievements. As we entered our fourth year, we faced a decision that would ultimately change everything. A major national corporation had approached us about a potential acquisition. The offer was substantial, enough to make all three of us financially secure for life, but it would also mean giving up the independence and culture we had worked so hard to build.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Marcus was immediately intrigued by the offer. He saw it as validation of everything we had accomplished and an opportunity to scale our impact on a national level. I was more skeptical, worried about losing control of our company culture and our ability to serve the smaller clients who had been the foundation of our success. Diego listened to both perspectives and suggested we take time to carefully evaluate the opportunity. He proposed that we engage a business attorney and financial advisor to help us understand the full implications of the offer before making any decisions. His measured approach helped prevent the acquisition discussions from becoming a source of conflict between Marcus and me. Over the following months, we went through extensive due diligence processes with the potential acquirer. We learned about their plans for our company, their expectations for our growth, and their vision for how we would fit into their larger organization. The more we learned, the more my reservations grew. Their corporate culture seemed antithetical to everything we had built, and their track record with previous acquisitions suggested they would likely dismantle much of what made us unique. Marcus remained optimistic, believing we could maintain our independence while benefiting from their resources and national reach. Diego supported whatever decision Marcus and I made together, but I could tell he was also becoming more concerned about the potential cultural changes an acquisition would bring. The tension between Marcus and me reached a breaking point during a particularly difficult negotiation session with the potential acquirer. They were pushing for changes to our client contracts and employment agreements that I felt betrayed our commitments to both our team and our clients. When I expressed my concerns, Marcus accused me of being inflexible and unwilling to see the bigger picture. That night, we had our worst fight ever. Marcus accused me of holding back the company's growth because of my fear of change. I accused him of being willing to sell out our principles for money and prestige. We said things to each other that we had never said before, things that revealed deeper philosophical differences about business and success that we had managed to overlook during our years of rapid growth. Diego tried to help us work through our differences, but the fundamental disagreement about the acquisition had exposed fault lines in our relationship that went beyond business strategy. Marcus and I began to question whether we were truly compatible as business partners and life partners, or whether our success had been built on shared ambition rather than shared values. The acquisition ultimately fell through when the potential buyer decided to pursue a larger agency that would give them more immediate scale. I was relieved, but Marcus was devastated. He felt we had missed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and he blamed my resistance for the deal's collapse. Our relationship never fully recovered from that conflict. Over the following months, Marcus became increasingly distant and critical of my management style. He began making unilateral decisions about client strategies and hiring without consulting me, claiming that my need for consensus was slowing down our growth. I found myself questioning every decision and feeling like I was walking on eggshells in my own company. Diego tried to maintain his role as mediator, but the tension between Marcus and me was affecting the entire team. Our once collaborative culture became strained and political, with employees choosing sides and productivity suffering as a result. Several of our best people left for other opportunities, citing the changing atmosphere as their primary reason for leaving. The personal toll was even more devastating. Marcus and I postponed our wedding indefinitely, claiming we needed to focus on stabilizing the company before making major personal commitments. In reality, we both knew that our relationship was in serious trouble, but neither of us was ready to admit that our differences might be irreconcilable. I began working even longer hours, partly to address the challenges facing our company, and partly to avoid spending time at home with Marcus. The apartment we had shared for 3 years felt tense and uncomfortable, filled with unspoken resentments and failed attempts at normal conversation. We were living like polite strangers rather than partners who had once planned to spend their lives together. Diego became my primary confidant during this difficult period. He was the only person who understood both the business pressures and the personal dynamics that were tearing my life apart. His office became my refuge when I needed to escape the tension of working directly with Marcus, and our lunch meetings became therapy sessions where I could process my frustration and confusion. My brother's support was invaluable, but I began to worry that our problems were affecting his relationship with Carmen and his overall happiness. He had joined our company to be part of something exciting and positive, not to referee ongoing conflicts between his sister and her fiancé. I felt guilty about putting him in such an impossible position, but I also didn't know how to resolve the underlying issues that were destroying everything we had built together. As our 5th anniversary approached, the company's financial performance remained strong, but the internal dynamics had become unsustainable. Marcus and I could barely get through a single meeting without disagreeing about strategy, priorities, or management philosophy. Our team was clearly suffering from the ongoing tension, and several major clients had begun asking questions about the company's stability and leadership. I knew something had to change, but I was paralyzed by the complexity of untangling my business partnership from my personal relationship with Marcus. We had built everything together, shared everything together, and planned our entire future together. The idea of ending either our business partnership or our romantic relationship felt like admitting that the last 5 years of my life had been built on a foundation of sand. Diego suggested that Marcus and I consider couples counseling to address our personal issues separately from our business conflicts. He believed that if we could repair our romantic relationship, our business partnership might naturally improve as well. The suggestion made sense, but it required both Marcus and me to acknowledge that our problems were serious enough to need professional help. When I brought up the idea of counseling, Marcus initially resisted, claiming that our issues were purely business-related and would resolve themselves once we found the right growth strategy. It took several more weeks of increasingly uncomfortable interactions before he agreed to attend a few sessions with me. The counseling sessions were revealing, but not in the way I had hoped. Instead of helping us find common ground, they highlighted just how differently we viewed success, relationships, and the future. Marcus wanted growth, prestige, and recognition on a national scale. I wanted sustainability, meaningful work, and the ability to maintain the values that had guided us from the beginning. Our therapist helped us communicate more effectively, but she couldn't bridge the fundamental gap between our different visions for our life together. After 2 months of sessions, we both realized that we had grown into different people with incompatible goals. The love we shared wasn't enough to overcome the philosophical differences that affected every aspect of our partnership. The decision to end our engagement was mutual but devastating. We had been together for over 7 years, and our relationship had been the foundation for everything else we had built. Ending our romantic partnership inevitably raised questions about our business partnership, but we initially agreed to try to maintain our professional relationship while living separately. Marcus moved out of our shared apartment, and we attempted to establish new boundaries that would allow us to continue working together effectively. For a few weeks, the arrangement seemed workable. Without the pressure of trying to maintain a romantic relationship, we were able to focus more clearly on business decisions and client needs. However, the underlying tensions that had destroyed our personal relationship continued to affect our professional interactions. We still disagreed about fundamental strategy questions, and our different management styles created ongoing friction with our team. The elephant in the room, our failed engagement, made every interaction awkward and emotionally charged. Diego worked overtime, trying to maintain stability during this transition period. He took on additional responsibilities, managed client relationships that had become complicated by our personal drama, and tried to shield our team from the worst of our ongoing conflicts. His loyalty and dedication during this period meant everything to me, and I knew I could never adequately repay him for his support. 3 months after our breakup, Marcus came to me with a proposal that seemed like a potential solution to our ongoing problems. He suggested that one of us should buy out the other's share of the company, allowing the remaining partner to move forward without the complications of our failed relationship. The idea made sense in principle, but the execution would be incredibly complex, given how intertwined our ownership and responsibilities had become. We engaged a business valuation firm to determine the fair market value of Elevate Marketing Solutions and began the process of negotiating a buyout agreement. The process was emotionally draining and professionally challenging, requiring us to put a price on everything we had built together while trying to maintain normal operations for our clients and employees. Initially, we both assumed I would be the one buying out Marcus's share. The company had been built around my strategic vision and analytical approach, and most of our key client relationships were ones I had developed and maintained. Marcus seemed eager to move on to new opportunities, and he had begun exploring the possibility of joining a larger agency or starting fresh in a different market. However, as the valuation process continued, it became clear that the buyout price would strain our company's cash flow and require significant external financing. The complexity of securing funding while maintaining normal operations was daunting, especially given the ongoing uncertainty about our leadership structure. Diego became instrumental in managing the buyout negotiations, serving as an intermediary between Marcus and me when direct communication became too difficult. His business acumen and objective perspective helped us navigate the complex financial and legal issues involved in restructuring our partnership. As we worked through the details of the buyout, I began to feel optimistic about the future for the first time in months. The prospect of having full control over the company's direction and culture was appealing, and I believed I could rebuild the collaborative environment that had made our early years so successful. Several key employees had privately expressed relief about the possibility of resolving the ongoing leadership tensions. The buyout process also forced me to confront my feelings about Marcus and our failed relationship. Working together on something as complex and emotionally charged as dissolving our business partnership provided a strange kind of closure. We were able to acknowledge the good things we had accomplished together, while accepting that our different visions for the future made continued partnership impossible. Diego's role during this period strengthened our relationship as siblings and business partners. His unwavering support and practical help during the most difficult months of my life proved that our childhood pact was still meaningful. I looked forward to building the next phase of our company together, without the complications that had made the previous year so challenging. As we approached the final stages of the buyout agreement, everything seemed to be falling into place. Marcus would receive his fair share of the value we had created together, and I would have the opportunity to lead the company forward according to my vision and values. Our employees were beginning to seem more optimistic about the future, and several clients had expressed confidence in the company's stability under my leadership. I should have known that something was wrong when Diego started coming to the office earlier and staying later than usual. I should have paid attention when he began asking detailed questions about our client contracts and financial arrangements. I should have wondered why he was suddenly so interested in our technology systems and operational procedures. But I was too focused on finalizing the buyout and planning for the future to notice the warning signs. Diego was my brother, my closest confidant, and my most trusted ally. The possibility that he might be working against my interests never even crossed my mind. After all, we had made a pact years ago to always have each other's backs, and he had proven his loyalty during the most difficult period of my professional and personal life. The morning I discovered the truth about what Diego had been planning, I was reviewing final documents for the buyout when my phone rang. It was Jennifer Chen, our corporate attorney, and her voice carried an urgency that immediately put me on alert. She asked if I could come to her office immediately to discuss an urgent matter related to Elevate Marketing Solutions. When I arrived at Jennifer's office, she handed me a stack of legal documents with a grim expression. The papers revealed that Diego had been negotiating a separate deal to sell his minority share of the company to a third party. But this wasn't just any third party, it was Marcus, acting on behalf of a newly formed entity that would give him and his mystery partners controlling interest in our company. The elaborate scheme had been months in the making. While I had been focused on buying out Marcus's share of the company, he had been secretly negotiating to acquire Diego's share plus additional investment from outside partners. The new ownership structure would leave me as a minority owner in the company I had founded, with Marcus and his partners controlling the board and all major decisions. But the worst part was yet to come. Jennifer's investigation into the mystery partners had revealed that the primary investor was Titan Marketing Group, the largest agency in Phoenix and our biggest competitor. They were the same company that had been aggressively targeting our clients and trying to recruit our employees for the past 2 years.
The betrayal was stunning in its scope and sophistication. My own brother had been secretly working with my ex-fiancé and our biggest competitor to steal the company I had built from the ground up. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed for, was being taken away by the two people I had trusted most in the world. As I sat in Jennifer's office, staring at the legal documents that spelled out the destruction of my life's work, I felt a numbness that went beyond shock or anger. This wasn't just a business betrayal, it was a complete violation of every relationship and trust that had mattered to me. The two men who had been closest to me had conspired to destroy everything I had built, and they had done it with a level of deception and planning that suggested months of careful preparation. The implications began to sink in as Jennifer explained the legal realities of the situation. Because Diego's ownership share had been structured as a minority stake, he had the legal right to sell to whoever he chose without my approval. The new investors would have enough combined ownership to control all major decisions about the company's future, including my role as CEO and the direction of our business strategy. Jennifer warned me that I needed to act quickly if I wanted to have any chance of protecting my interests. The sale was scheduled to close within 2 weeks, and once the new ownership structure was in place, my options would be severely limited. She recommended that I immediately hire a specialist in business litigation and consider all possible legal challenges to the transaction. As I left Jennifer's office, my phone was buzzing with text messages from Diego asking if we could meet for lunch to discuss some exciting news about the company's future. The casual tone of his messages felt surreal given what I had just learned about his betrayal. He was still pretending to be my loyal brother and business partner while actively working to destroy everything we had supposedly built together. I drove home in a daze, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. The company that had been my life for the past 5 years was being stolen from me by my own brother and ex-fiancé, working in partnership with our biggest competitor. The betrayal was so complete and devastating that I struggled to comprehend how it was even possible. The worst part was realizing that Diego's support during my breakup with Marcus had all been an elaborate performance. While I had been leaning on him for emotional support and practical help, he had been secretly planning to betray me in the most devastating way possible. Every conversation we had shared about my hopes for the company's future had been feeding information to my enemies about how to most effectively destroy my dreams. That evening, alone in my apartment, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what was happening. The two people I had loved and trusted most in the world had not only betrayed me, they had done it in a way that would destroy my financial security, my professional reputation, and my ability to continue doing the work I was passionate about. The company that had been my identity for the past 5 years was being taken away by the people who had helped me build it. As I sat on my couch, staring at the legal documents that detailed my brother's treachery, I realized that I was facing the fight of my life. Everything I had worked for was at stake, and the people who should have been protecting me were the ones trying to destroy me. But somewhere beneath the shock and devastation, I felt the first stirring of determination. They might have betrayed me, but they had underestimated me. And I was not going to let them win without a fight. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The initial shock had given way to a cold, calculating anger that sharpened my focus and steeled my resolve. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. If Diego and Marcus wanted a war, they were about to discover that they had seriously underestimated their opponent. My first call was to Rachel Morrison, the most aggressive business litigation attorney in Phoenix. I had heard her name whispered in boardrooms and country club conversations, always with a mixture of respect and fear. She specialized in corporate warfare and had a reputation for destroying opponents who tried to manipulate the legal system for personal gain. If anyone could help me fight back against this betrayal, it would be her. Rachel's assistant squeezed me in for an emergency consultation that afternoon. When I arrived at her downtown office, I was struck by the wall of awards and newspaper clippings documenting her victories against some of the most powerful business interests in Arizona. She was exactly what I needed, someone who understood that this wasn't just about money, but about justice and survival. Rachel listened intently as I explained the situation, occasionally asking pointed questions about ownership structures, voting rights, and the timeline of Diego's deception. Her expression remained neutral throughout my explanation, but I could see her mind working, analyzing angles and identifying potential strategies. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled for the first time since I had entered her office. The legal situation was complex, but not hopeless. While Diego had the technical right to sell his shares, the manner in which the sale was being conducted raised several potential issues. The involvement of our direct competitor created possible conflicts of interest and fiduciary duty violations. More importantly, if I could prove that Diego had used his position within the company to provide confidential information to our competitors, we might have grounds for both civil and criminal charges. Rachel explained that we needed to move quickly and strategically. Our first priority was to gather evidence of Diego's betrayal and document the damage his actions had caused to the company. We would need to examine email communications, financial records, and client interactions to build a case that would hold up in court. The process would be expensive and time-consuming, but Rachel was confident that we could at least force a more favorable resolution than the complete takeover Diego and Marcus were planning. I left Rachel's office feeling energized for the first time since discovering the betrayal. Having a plan and an ally changed everything. I wasn't helpless, and I wasn't going to surrender without a fight. The next few weeks would determine the future of everything I had built, but at least now I had a roadmap for the battle ahead. The challenge was maintaining normal operations while secretly gathering evidence against my own brother. I had to continue working alongside Diego every day, pretending that I didn't know about his treachery, while carefully documenting his actions and communications. It was the most difficult acting job of my life, requiring me to smile and engage in casual conversation with someone I now knew was actively working to destroy me. Diego seemed completely comfortable with his deception, continuing to offer advice about the company's future and expressing concern about my stress levels. His ability to maintain such a convincing facade was almost more disturbing than the betrayal itself. How long had he been capable of such elaborate deception? Had our entire relationship been built on lies and manipulation? I began paying closer attention to Diego's daily routine, noting when he arrived at the office, who he met with, and how he spent his time. Rachel had advised me to document everything, no matter how trivial it might seem. Patterns of behavior that appeared innocent individually might reveal a larger conspiracy when viewed collectively. The first breakthrough came when I discovered that Diego had been having regular lunch meetings with someone from Titan Marketing Group for the past 3 months. Our receptionist mentioned it casually when I asked about Diego's schedule, not realizing the significance of the information. Those meetings had coincided exactly with the period when several of our clients had received aggressive counter-proposals from Titan. Armed with this information, Rachel was able to subpoena Diego's phone and email records through a preliminary injunction filing. The legal maneuvering was complex, but essentially we were arguing that Diego's actions constituted a breach of fiduciary duty that threatened irreparable harm to the company. The judge agreed to allow limited discovery, while considering our request for a temporary restraining order. The email evidence was devastating. Diego had been providing Titan with detailed information about our client contracts, pricing strategies, and upcoming campaign plans. He had shared proprietary research data that we had spent months developing and had even forwarded internal strategy documents discussing our company's vulnerabilities and growth challenges. But the most damaging evidence was a series of text messages between Diego and Marcus discussing their plans for my future role in the company. They had agreed that I would be forced out within 6 months of the acquisition, with Marcus taking over as CEO and Diego serving as his second in command. They had already begun planning how to divide my client relationships and reassign my responsibilities. The personal nature of their communications was particularly hurtful. Diego had described me as stubborn and controlling, claiming that the company would be much more successful without my micromanaging and risk-averse leadership style. Marcus had agreed, adding that he had learned to manage my moods during our relationship, but was relieved that he wouldn't have to deal with my perfectionist tendencies much longer. Reading those messages felt like being stabbed repeatedly by people I had loved and trusted. The casual cruelty of their assessment of my character and abilities was almost worse than the business betrayal. They weren't just stealing my company, they were rewriting our entire history to justify their actions and convince themselves that I deserved what was happening to me. Rachel used this evidence to file an expanded lawsuit alleging conspiracy, breach of fiduciary duty, theft of trade secrets, and intentional interference with business relationships. The legal filing painted a detailed picture of a months-long scheme designed to steal my company while destroying my professional reputation and financial security. The day the lawsuit was filed, I finally confronted Diego directly. I had been dreading this moment, knowing that it would permanently end any possibility of reconciliation between us. But I also needed to look him in the eye and hear his justification for what he had done to me. I waited until the office was empty and then knocked on Diego's door. He looked up from his computer with his usual warm smile, the same expression he had worn throughout our childhood when he was protecting me from bullies or helping me with homework. The disconnect between that familiar smile and what I now knew about his true intentions was jarring. I placed a copy of the lawsuit on his desk and watched his expression change as he realized what he was looking at. The color drained from his face, and for the first time in months, his confident facade cracked. He looked up at me with genuine surprise and something that might have been fear. Diego immediately began protesting his innocence, claiming that I had misunderstood his actions and that everything he had done was intended to help the company succeed. He insisted that the partnership with Titan would provide resources and opportunities that we could never achieve on our own. His explanations sounded rehearsed, as if he had been preparing for this confrontation for weeks. When I showed him printouts of his text messages with Marcus, Diego's denials became more desperate and less coherent. He claimed that his communications had been taken out of context and that his criticisms of my leadership style were just venting frustrations, not serious assessments. He begged me to withdraw the lawsuit and work together to find a solution that would benefit everyone involved. The conversation lasted over an hour, with Diego alternating between denials, justifications, and pleas for forgiveness. He reminded me of our childhood pact to always support each other and claimed that his actions were motivated by concern for my future rather than personal gain. He insisted that I would be happier and more successful working for a larger organization rather than carrying the stress of running my own company. I listened to his explanations with growing disgust and disappointment. The brother I had idolized for most of my life was revealing himself to be a manipulator and a liar who was willing to destroy my dreams to advance his own career. There was no remorse in his voice, only frustration that his plans had been discovered before they could be fully implemented. When Diego realized that his denials and justifications weren't working, he shifted tactics and became angry. He accused me of being paranoid and vindictive, claiming that I was trying to destroy his career out of spite over my failed relationship with Marcus. He argued that I was being selfish and short-sighted, putting my personal feelings ahead of what was best for the company and our employees. The transformation from apologetic brother to hostile adversary was swift and complete. Diego's mask had finally slipped, revealing the calculating stranger who had been living behind his familiar face. The person sitting across from me bore no resemblance to the protective older brother who had shaped my childhood and adolescence. I left his office without saying another word. There was nothing left to discuss, and no possibility of reconciliation. Diego had made his choice, and now he would have to live with the consequences. Our relationship was over, and the legal battle would determine whether I could salvage anything from the wreckage of my company and my family.
The next few days were a whirlwind of legal activity and media attention. News of the lawsuit spread quickly through Phoenix's business community, generating speculation and gossip about the dramatic family conflict. Several business publications picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about mixing family relationships with business partnerships. The media attention was uncomfortable but ultimately beneficial to my case. The coverage highlighted the unusual nature of Diego's betrayal and generated sympathy for my position as the victimized founder. Several former clients reached out to express their support and share their own suspicions about Titan's aggressive tactics in recent months. More importantly, the publicity put pressure on Titan to respond publicly to the allegations. Their initial statement was carefully crafted by their legal team, denying any wrongdoing while expressing confidence that the acquisition would proceed as planned. However, the statement inadvertently confirmed several details about their relationship with Diego that strengthened our case. Rachel worked around the clock to prepare for the preliminary hearing that would determine whether we could block the sale while the lawsuit proceeded. The legal arguments were complex, involving corporate law, fiduciary duties, and trade secret protection. But the underlying question was simple: should someone be allowed to profit from betraying the trust of their own family? The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday, giving us less than a week to prepare our case. Rachel assembled a team of associates and paralegals to help gather additional evidence and prepare witness statements. I spent those days living in a state of controlled anxiety, knowing that the hearing would largely determine my future. Marcus finally contacted me directly on the Friday before the hearing. He claimed that he wanted to discuss a potential settlement that would be fair to everyone involved. Against Rachel's advice, I agreed to meet with him at a neutral location to hear what he had to say. We met at a small coffee shop near the courthouse, a location chosen for its public nature and lack of emotional associations. Marcus looked tired and stressed, lacking his usual confidence and charm.
The past few months had clearly taken a toll on him as well, though I found it difficult to summon much sympathy for his situation. Marcus's settlement proposal was generous in financial terms but devastating in practical ones. He offered to buy out my shares at a premium to their current market value, essentially paying me to walk away from the company I had founded. The offer would make me financially secure, but would also force me to start over completely in an industry where my former partners were now my biggest competitors. The conversation was surreal, discussing the dismantling of our shared dreams as if we were negotiating the sale of a used car. Marcus seemed genuinely confused by my reluctance to accept his offer, apparently believing that adequate financial compensation should resolve all the emotional and professional damage his betrayal had caused. When I asked Marcus why he had chosen to partner with Diego and Titan rather than simply buying out my shares directly, his explanation revealed the calculated nature of their conspiracy. Working with Titan provided access to resources and client relationships that neither Marcus nor Diego could have accessed independently. More importantly, the partnership allowed them to acquire the company at a fraction of its true value by forcing me into a desperate situation. Marcus claimed that he still cared about me and wanted to minimize the damage to our personal relationship. He insisted that the business acquisition was nothing personal, just a strategic opportunity that made sense for everyone involved. His ability to separate our romantic history from his professional betrayal was stunning in its coldness. I declined his settlement offer and left the coffee shop feeling more determined than ever to fight for my company. Marcus's casual attitude toward the destruction of our relationship and my career confirmed that I was dealing with people who would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. The weekend before the hearing was the longest of my life. I tried to distract myself with normal activities, but my mind kept returning to the upcoming legal battle and its potential outcomes. Everything I had worked for was hanging in the balance, and I wouldn't know the result until Tuesday afternoon. Rachel called me Sunday evening to review our strategy one final time. She was cautiously optimistic about our chances but warned me that preliminary hearings were notoriously difficult to predict. Judges were often reluctant to interfere with business transactions unless the evidence of wrongdoing was overwhelming. We had a strong case, but we also faced experienced opponents who had significant resources at their disposal. Monday night, I barely slept. I kept replaying conversations with Diego and Marcus, looking for signs I should have noticed earlier. How long had they been planning this betrayal? Were there warning signals I had missed, or had they been skilled enough to completely hide their true intentions? The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in my most professional suit and arrived at the courthouse early. The courtroom was packed with reporters, business associates, and curious observers drawn by the dramatic nature of the case. I felt exposed and vulnerable under the scrutiny of so many strangers, but I also drew strength from the support of friends and colleagues who had come to show their solidarity. Diego and Marcus sat at the defendant's table with their legal team, both of them avoiding eye contact with me. Diego looked uncomfortable and nervous, while Marcus maintained his usual composed demeanor. Titan's executives sat in the gallery, observing the proceedings with the detached interest of people who viewed the entire situation as a minor business inconvenience. The hearing lasted 4 hours, with both sides presenting evidence and arguments about the proposed sale and its legitimacy. Rachel was masterful in her presentation, systematically building a case that Diego's actions constituted a clear breach of his fiduciary duties and that the acquisition was tainted by fraud and conspiracy. The defense team argued that Diego had acted within his legal rights as a minority shareholder and that any information shared with Titan was already publicly available or could be reasonably inferred from industry knowledge. They portrayed the lawsuit as a desperate attempt by a disgruntled founder to prevent a legitimate business transaction. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke directly and honestly about the betrayal I had experienced and the damage it had caused to both the company and my personal life. I described the months of deception, the violation of trust, and the systematic theft of confidential information that had given our competitors an unfair advantage. The judge listened intently to all the testimony and arguments, asking probing questions of both sides. Her expression remained neutral throughout the proceedings, giving no indication of how she was interpreting the evidence. When the hearing concluded, she announced that she would issue a written decision within 48 hours. Those 48 hours were agony. I tried to stay busy with work and normal activities, but my concentration was shot. Rachel warned me that the wait was normal and that rushing the judge's decision wouldn't help our cause. Still, every hour that passed felt like a lifetime. The call came on Thursday afternoon while I was reviewing client files in my office. Rachel's voice was calm, but I could hear the excitement underneath her professional demeanor. The judge had granted our request for a preliminary injunction, blocking the sale pending the outcome of our lawsuit. More importantly, she had issued a strong written opinion that suggested she found our evidence of conspiracy and breach of fiduciary duty compelling. The victory was only temporary, but it felt like vindication after months of betrayal and uncertainty. We had succeeded in stopping Diego and Marcus's immediate plans, giving us time to build an even stronger case for the full trial. The judge's decision also sent a clear message to the business community that such blatant betrayals of trust would not be tolerated by the courts. Diego and Marcus's legal team immediately announced their intention to appeal the decision, but Rachel was confident that the preliminary injunction would hold. The evidence we had presented was too strong and the judge's reasoning too sound for an appellate court to easily overturn. We had bought ourselves months rather than weeks to prepare for the main event. The next phase of the legal battle would be even more intense and expensive, but I faced it with renewed confidence. The preliminary hearing had validated my decision to fight rather than accept defeat. Diego and Marcus had underestimated both my determination and the strength of my legal position. Now they would discover that stealing someone's life work was more complicated than they had anticipated. The business community's reaction to the judge's decision was overwhelmingly supportive of my position. Several industry leaders reached out to offer their assistance and express their outrage at Diego's betrayal. The case had become a symbol of the importance of business ethics and family loyalty, generating discussions about the proper boundaries between personal relationships and professional opportunities. More practically, the preliminary injunction allowed me to begin rebuilding the company's stability and morale. Several employees who had been considering leaving decided to stay, energized by the legal victory and the prospect of returning to our original mission and values. Key clients who had been wavering in their loyalty recommitted to our partnership, impressed by my willingness to fight for the company's independence. The publicity had also attracted the attention of potential investors who were interested in supporting my efforts to maintain control of the company. While I was reluctant to bring in outside partners after being betrayed by family, the financial support would be crucial for funding the ongoing legal battle and future growth. As I left the courthouse after the hearing, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief at the immediate victory, determination to see the fight through to the end, and sadness at the permanent destruction of my relationship with Diego. The brother I had loved and trusted was gone, replaced by a stranger who had been willing to destroy my dreams for his own advancement. But alongside the sadness was a growing sense of empowerment. I had faced the worst betrayal imaginable and not only survived but fought back effectively. The scared, confused woman who had discovered the conspiracy just weeks earlier had been replaced by someone stronger and more determined. Whatever happened in the months ahead, I knew I would never again be vulnerable to such manipulation and deception. The preliminary victory was just the beginning of a much longer battle, but it had proven that justice was possible and that betrayal didn't always triumph over truth. Diego and Marcus had made a critical error in underestimating my resolve and the strength of my case. Now they would discover that the quiet, analytical sister and ex-fiancé they had dismissed was capable of fighting back with everything she had. The war for my company and my future was far from over, but I had won the first major battle. And that victory had shown me exactly what I was fighting for: not just a business but my integrity, my independence, and my right to control my own destiny. Whatever the cost, I was going to see this fight through to the end. The trial took place 8 months later in a downtown Phoenix courtroom that had become as familiar to me as my own office. During those months, Rachel and her team had built an airtight case that went far beyond the original charges. What we discovered during the discovery process shocked even me, revealing a level of planning and deception that made the initial betrayal seem almost simple by comparison. Diego hadn't just been sharing information with Titan for 3 months as we originally thought. The evidence showed that his relationship with them went back over a year, beginning shortly after Marcus and I had started having problems about the potential acquisition. He had been playing the role of supportive brother while systematically documenting our client relationships, financial vulnerabilities, and strategic plans. The most damaging revelation came from forensic analysis of our computer systems. Diego had been copying files to external drives for months, creating a comprehensive database of our proprietary information that he had turned over to Titan. The stolen data included client research we had spent years developing, pricing algorithms that gave us competitive advantages, and detailed profiles of our employees' skills and compensation packages. Marcus's involvement was even more extensive than we had initially realized. Text messages recovered from his phone showed that he had been coordinating with Diego from the very beginning of our relationship troubles. While I thought we were working through normal relationship issues, Marcus had been strategically gathering information about my insecurities and management style to use against me in their takeover plans. The trial lasted 3 weeks, with dozens of witnesses testifying about the systematic theft of trade secrets and the conspiracy to defraud me of my ownership rights. Former Titan employees came forward to describe how Diego's information had been used to target our clients and employees. Several of our competitors testified about receiving stolen information through Titan's network. But the most powerful testimony came from our own employees who described the toxic atmosphere that had developed as Diego fed negative information about my leadership to Titan's executives.
They had been recruited with promises of better positions and higher salaries if they helped facilitate the transition to new ownership. The betrayal hadn't just been personal, it had corrupted the entire culture we had worked so hard to build. Diego's testimony was devastating to watch. Under cross-examination, he crumbled completely, admitting to acts of corporate espionage that went far beyond anything we had originally suspected. His attorney had clearly advised him to take responsibility in hopes of avoiding criminal charges, but his confessions destroyed any remaining sympathy I might have had for him. When asked why he had betrayed his own sister, Diego claimed he had convinced himself that I would be better off working for someone else rather than carrying the stress of running my own company. It was the same paternalistic nonsense he had tried to sell me during our confrontation, but hearing it in open court made it sound even more hollow and self-serving. Marcus maintained his composure better, but his testimony revealed a calculating coldness that shocked everyone in the courtroom. He admitted that he had never intended to honor our business partnership after our romantic relationship ended. From his perspective, the company had always been his vision, and I had simply been a useful partner during the early growth phase. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning with a verdict that exceeded even Rachel's expectations. They found in my favor on all counts, awarding damages that included the full value of the stolen information, punitive damages for the conspiracy, and additional compensation for the emotional distress caused by the family betrayal. More importantly, the judge issued a permanent injunction preventing the sale to Titan and ordering the return of all stolen information. Diego was required to sell his shares back to me at their original purchase price, effectively giving me complete control of the company for a fraction of what Marcus had offered months earlier. The criminal referral came a week later when the district attorney's office announced they were filing charges against both Diego and Marcus for corporate espionage and conspiracy to commit fraud. The FBI raid on Titan's offices made headlines throughout the Southwest, leading to the resignation of several senior executives and an SEC investigation into their business practices. Diego accepted a plea bargain that included 2 years in federal prison and restitution payments that would continue for the next decade. Marcus fought the charges but was eventually convicted and sentenced to 4 years. Watching them both led away in handcuffs should have felt like victory, but mostly it just felt sad and empty. The legal victory allowed me to rebuild Elevate Marketing Solutions according to my original vision, but the process was more challenging than I had anticipated. Several clients had left during the uncertainty of the legal battle, and we had lost some of our best employees to competitors who had recruited them during the chaos. But the publicity from the trial had also generated significant positive attention. Business leaders throughout the region reached out to express their admiration for my willingness to fight for my principles. New clients arrived weekly, drawn by the story of our survival and our commitment to ethical business practices. I used part of the legal settlement to establish an employee stock ownership program that gave every member of our team a financial stake in the company's success. It was a way of ensuring that the betrayal I had experienced could never happen again, while also creating the collaborative culture that had made our early years so successful. The therapy sessions with Dr. Rebecca Santos helped me process the emotional aftermath of the betrayal and develop healthier boundaries in both my personal and professional relationships.
Learning to trust again after such comprehensive deception was a gradual process that required constant attention and self-reflection. Dr. Santos helped me understand that Diego's betrayal said nothing about my worth as a person or my capabilities as a leader. His actions reflected his own moral failures and psychological limitations, not any inadequacy on my part. Accepting that truth intellectually was easier than feeling it emotionally, but therapy provided tools for bridging that gap. The hardest part was rebuilding my relationship with my parents, who had initially struggled to accept the reality of what Diego had done. They had raised us to believe that family loyalty was sacred, and Diego's betrayal challenged their fundamental understanding of their own parenting and values. Eventually, they came to understand that supporting me didn't mean abandoning Diego, but it did mean acknowledging the truth about his actions and their consequences. Our relationship was different now, more honest but also more fragile. The easy assumptions about family bonds had been shattered, replaced by connections that required constant nurturing and attention. 2 years after the trial, I was featured on the cover of Southwest Business magazine as Entrepreneur of the Year. The article focused on how I had rebuilt the company stronger than ever while maintaining the ethical standards that had almost cost me everything. We had grown to over 50 employees and were expanding into new markets throughout the region. The interview process forced me to reflect on how much had changed since that morning when I first discovered Diego's betrayal. The scared, confused woman who had sat in Jennifer Chen's office, learning about the conspiracy, felt like a different person entirely. I had been tested in ways I never could have imagined and emerged with a clearer understanding of my own strength and values. Standing in our new office space, watching my team collaborate on innovative campaigns for clients who trusted us with their most important marketing challenges, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenue or recognition. We had built something authentic and sustainable, something that couldn't be stolen or manipulated by people with hidden agendas. The scar from Diego's betrayal would always be with me, but it had also taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, integrity, and the difference between loyalty and enabling. Real family doesn't require you to sacrifice your dreams or compromise your principles. Real partnership is built on mutual respect and shared values, not convenience or obligation. Emma, who had stood by me throughout the entire ordeal, often joked that I had become a completely different person. She was right in some ways. The woman who had once worried constantly about maintaining family harmony at any cost had been replaced by someone who understood that peace built on lies and manipulation wasn't worth preserving. The new Sophia was more cautious about trust, but also more confident in her own judgment. I had learned to listen to my instincts rather than dismissing them in favor of what others wanted me to believe. The gaslighting and manipulation that had made me question my own perceptions was no longer possible because I had developed unshakable faith in my own experience. My dating life remained complicated. The betrayal by 2 of the most important men in my life had left deep scars that made it difficult to open up to new romantic possibilities. But I was working on it in therapy and trying to remain open to the possibility that not everyone would disappoint me. The business continued to thrive, attracting clients who were drawn to our story of survival and our commitment to authentic relationships. We had become known as the agency that would never compromise its principles for profit, a reputation that resonated with business leaders who were tired of dealing with competitors who prioritized winning over honesty. On quiet Sunday mornings, I sometimes found myself thinking about the alternative timeline where I had accepted Marcus's settlement offer and walked away from the fight. I would have been financially comfortable but professionally adrift, probably working for someone else and wondering what might have been if I had found the courage to fight back. The legal victory had given me more than just control of my company. It had proven to myself and the world that integrity and determination could triumph over deception and manipulation. The scared woman who had discovered the conspiracy had found reserves of strength she never knew existed. Every success we achieved felt more meaningful because of what we had overcome to reach it. Every client relationship we built was precious because we understood how easily trust could be broken and how hard it was to rebuild. Every day that I walked into the office was a reminder that sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up making you stronger than you ever imagined possible. The story of Diego's betrayal and my fight to save my company had become something of a legend in Phoenix's business community. Young entrepreneurs often reached out for advice about dealing with difficult partners or family members who didn't support their ambitions. I tried to share the lessons I had learned without being preachy or prescriptive. The most important lesson was that your worth isn't determined by other people's willingness to value you appropriately. Diego's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also freed me from the need to earn his approval or live up to his expectations. I had learned to validate myself rather than seeking validation from people who might never be capable of providing it. 3 years after the trial, I received an unexpected letter from Diego, written from the federal facility where he was serving his sentence. The letter was full of apologies and explanations, attempts to justify his actions while taking responsibility for their consequences. He claimed to have found religion and developed a new understanding of the harm he had caused. I read the letter twice and then put it in my desk drawer without responding. Perhaps someday I would be ready to engage with his attempts at reconciliation, but that day hadn't arrived yet. The brother who had protected me throughout childhood was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize or trust. Maybe that person could change and grow, but I wasn't obligated to be part of that process. The silence wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about protecting the peace I had worked so hard to build and maintaining boundaries that supported my continued healing. Forgiveness might come eventually, but it would be on my terms and my timeline, not his. Standing in my office on a bright Thursday afternoon, looking out at the Phoenix skyline and the mountains beyond, I felt grateful for the journey that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but surviving it had taught me who I really was and what I was truly capable of achieving. The scared people-pleasing woman who had once worried more about maintaining family harmony than protecting her own interests was gone. In her place was someone who understood that the most important relationship you can have is the one you have with yourself. Someone who had learned that integrity isn't just about how you treat others but about how you allow others to treat you. My story wasn't unique in many ways. Betrayal by family members and romantic partners happens every day, destroying lives and dreams with depressing regularity. But my response to that betrayal had been a choice, a decision to fight rather than surrender, to seek justice rather than accepting injustice as inevitable. The legal victory had been important, but the personal victory was more significant. I had discovered that I was stronger than I knew, braver than I imagined, and more resourceful than anyone had ever given me credit for. The woman who had once sought validation from others had learned to validate herself. The company that Diego and Marcus had tried to steal was now more successful than it had ever been under our original partnership. We had built something sustainable and authentic, something that reflected our values rather than compromising them for short-term gains. The culture of trust and collaboration that I had always envisioned was finally fully realized. Looking back, I could see that the betrayal, as painful as it had also been a gift. It had forced me to discover my own strength and develop the courage to stand up for my principles even when the cost was enormous. It had taught me the difference between toxic loyalty and healthy boundaries. Most importantly, it had shown me that sometimes the people who try to break you end up revealing just how unbreakable you really are. Diego and Marcus had intended to destroy my confidence and steal my future. Instead, they had inadvertently freed me from the limitations I had imposed on myself and shown me what I was truly capable of achieving. The afternoon sun streaming through my office windows highlighted the awards on my walls, the photos of our team celebrations, and the thank you notes from satisfied clients. But more than any external recognition, the light illuminated the peace I felt about the choices I had made and the person I had become. The betrayal was behind me now, a chapter in my story rather than the end of it. Ahead lay infinite possibilities, bounded only by my own imagination and determination. I had survived the worst that life could throw at me and emerged stronger, wiser, and more authentically myself than ever before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.